It's time for 5-Minute Advice for Authors, brought to you by Twin Flame Studios.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gena Cox. I am an organizational psychologist, an executive coach, and the author of a book called Leading Inclusion that was launched in October of 2022. And I'm just really delighted to be here to tell you a little bit more about this author journey, which in my case was supported by having a book not just in hardcover, but also an audio version. That was an important part of the whole effort. You know, the three big ideas that I hope a reader or a listener takes away from my book are these. The first is that inclusion is important because human variation is normal. And that simply means that because human variation is normal, you know, anything that we do that falls under that so-called umbrella of inclusion is really important, and it does matter. But interestingly, inclusion tops diversity. Often in the conversations about DE&I, there's a lot of emphasis on the D. And the D is really just about representation. You can call it head count. You know, what proportion of people that have certain characteristics in your workforce, what's the proportion in your workforce relative to the availability of those people with those characteristics in the broader workforce? But the problem is, if you focus too much on diversity and don't think about inclusion, you have these situations that many of us heard about in the news in the last couple of years, where you bring people into an organization and it feels like, you know, being the 11th person at a 10-person dinner party. You know, you get there to discover that there is no place setting for you. You got to ask, you know, your boss, who is now your boss, who is your host, you know, where's your silverware, where's your plate, and to explain what's on the menu. And so nobody wants that. So I tell, you know, in this book, the value of really focusing on building a culture of inclusion first, or at least at the same time as you try to enhance diversity. But probably the most important idea in my book that I hope every person takes away is that you should put respect as the core outcome in everything that you do under the umbrella of DE&I, because employees understand it. It has what we call high face validity in psychology, and it is something that you can set expectations for and measure. You know, I do have some advice for authors, and maybe two pieces, but I'll start with the first. A.J. Harper is someone whose work I really admire, and she once said to me that a book is not about something. A book is for someone. And I'll never forget that. And this was really invaluable advice as I was working on my book, because I created that avatar, if you would, of who is my ideal reader. And I kind of had that person in my head and literally had that definition on my desktop every day as I was writing my book. So one piece of advice that I give to authors is to not just think about what you want to write about, but think about who you're writing it for. And if you're very crystal clear about who that is, it really will help you as it helped me to make every decision about wording, book length, you know, tone, and all the other important decisions that you have to make as an author. And so that would be one critical piece of advice. You know, creating an audiobook was a new experience for me, and it was a very positive experience because, as it turned out, you know, working with the audio engineer, who I had initially thought of as just someone who gets it done, but turned out to be someone who gets it done, but makes you feel good as you're doing it. That experience was a bonus. And it really was the experience that I had in working on my book. Additionally, you know, it wasn't just that sort of feel-good experience, but I learned so much about the idea that I was trying to convey as the engineers offered advice, not just about, as I said before, getting it done, but also they were sort of like my first listeners, my first audio audience, and their recommendations were invaluable.
Thanks for joining us on 5-Minute Advice for Authors. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe for more, and visit us at twinflamestudios.com.